I'm sure each one of us has experienced the act of walking into a dark room. No lights in the room, and you walk in, and as you walk into a room, what is it that you do? What is it that you reach out for? Maybe it's just the wall to keep track of where you're at, or to find that chair that is out there somewhere. Or you reach in the room, the first thing you do is reach out and turn on the light switch so you can see. But we've all experienced that. Or how about the experience of being in a room with other people, and unexpectedly all the lights go out and it's just pitch dark in that room? What do? Initially we probably just stand still. We stop in our tracks, but we also reach out for those around us to see if they're there, if they're still there, and there's comfort in reaching out like that. And the truth of that is, when we can't see what's in front of us, what's around us, we reach out for people. We'll grab a hand or follow a voice, or we just trust someone who seems to know where they're going. And that's why when we are walking in the light as believers, there's something that we need to do. The importance of showing up. When we're walking in the light, when we are walking in our faith, we need to show up. The question isn't, do I have all the right beliefs? Do I understand everything perfectly? Really, the question is, are we living in such a way that we are helping those who are stumbling around in the dark to find their footing? And that's what John touches on today. We're looking at 1 John chapter 2, verses 7 to 11. He says, "Dear friends, I'm not writing you a new command, but an old one, which you have had since the beginning. This old command is the message you have heard. Yet I am writing you a new command. Its truth is seen in him and in you, because the darkness is passing, and the true light is already shining. Anyone who claims to be in the light, but hates a brother or sister, is still in the darkness. Anyone who loves their brother and sister lives in the light, and there is nothing in them to make them stumble. But anyone who hates a brother or sister is in the darkness and walks around in the darkness. They do not know where they are going, because the darkness has blinded them." And so here's John is writing this letter. He's writing to people that are in real pain. They were part of a group a church, that something had happened and there was a church split. People left. And then when they left, they took friends with them. And it left those who were behind hurt and confused. And many churches in our lifetime, church splits, the hardship that has brought. So John's writing to these people who are maybe thinking, if our own people walk away from us, is any of this church stuff, is it real? And John gives them a simple, practical test. And it's simply, look at your relationships. Look at how the relationships that you have with others. And so today we're going to look at 4 things that this passage tells us about what it actually means to walk in the light, to walk in faith. And number 1 is that love is the proof that we are walking in the light. Think about someone that you knew growing up. Maybe it was a parent or a coach or a neighbor, and who didn't talk much about faith, didn't talk much about love, didn't talk much about kindness. But they were kind and they were loving. What did they do that made you notice it? What did they do that made you realize that there was something different about them? And if you look at verses 7 to 8, we're going to look at verse 7 and 8 again. What is the strange thing about what John says here? Look at this again. He says, "Dear friends, I'm not writing you a new command, but an old one which you have had since the beginning. This old command is the message you have heard, yet I am writing you a new command. Its truth is seen in him and in you because the darkness is passing and the true light is already shining." He says, I'm not writing you a new command. I'm writing you a new command. I'm not writing you a new command. There's the old command that is there, but I am writing you a new command. And the old command is found back in Leviticus 19, verse 18, where it says, God says, love your neighbor as yourself. And you look ahead to when Jesus came to this earth, he's asked, what's the greatest commandment? And Jesus says, well, love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. But when Jesus said that, he lived it, but he elevated, what does love look like? And he loved everybody. He didn't just repeat the rule of love your neighbor as yourself. He modeled it at the highest possible level. And so what does that mean for us? What can we learn from this idea of love your neighbor as yourself, as an old command, yet a new command? Well, love isn't a feeling we have. It's a direction we move. You know, we need to be moving toward others, even when it costs you. You think of Jesus, and he always went to the people. He was the one that called them to himself. He's the one that he rubbed shoulders with the lowest of society, but he also had that connection with the religious leaders, and there was that fight there all the time. But he was doing, everything he did was out of love for the Father. And you could see that in the relationships. It wasn't a feeling that he had, it was a direction that he went in. And so we need to realize that the love that we have, we don't necessarily have to feel love towards someone else, but we should be having that loving direction in mind. John says the truth is now seen in him and in you, and it basically meaning that the proof of Jesus isn't just the gospel story, that he came, lived a perfect life, died on a cross, laid in a tomb, rose on the third day, ascended into heaven, and poured out his Spirit in us. Now, if we believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of the living God, if we believe in our heart that, or confess with our mouth that Jesus is Lord, and believe in our hearts that God raised him from the dead, we're saved. You know, that's the gospel message. But John says the truth of walking in the light is now seen in him and in you. It means that love is seen in how we go about our days. In this room, we see the love of God. How we treat the person next to us, our next door neighbor, our closest friends, our distant friends, how we love on them. That is the proof that we are walking in the light, that we are people of faith, as if we have the love of God, but we are sharing the love of God. And when love shows up, it's not proof of how hard we're trying. We can say, man, I love this person so much, I'm doing so much for them. What love is, it's the evidence that something has already happened within us. And so to be walking in the light means to be showing up, and when we show up with love. Not because we're trying to prove something, not because we're trying to earn something. We show up with love because we have received the love of God in us, and he has changed us. So love is that proof that we are walking in the light. Before we move on, where does our love actually show up in a regular week? I want you to think about that. Where does our love actually show up in a regular week? Not, well, I love everybody. but specifically towards specific people, what does it look like? How do we express that love? How do we show the love of God towards those around us? Love is real when it shows up in people. But John takes it further and he says, love and light are connected. If you're not moving toward others, if you're not moving toward those loving connections, we may not be able to see as clearly as we think. Let's take a look at that. And this is one of those odd things that maybe we don't think about too often. Number 2 is that darkness may not feel like darkness. Have you ever looked back at a time of your life, a season, a year, a relationship you were in, and you realize that you were more confused and off track in your life than you realized? You look back to a time where you didn't realize you were struggling as much as you were. What helped you finally see that you were in the darkness? And here's an interesting thought about that darkness. We may not feel like we're in the darkness. If you were blind, you don't feel the blindness if you're already there. If you're already living in darkness, you don't realize you're in darkness. And John says something that is so important for us to consider in our own walk. These are people, he's talking to people that are walking with the Lord. And he makes this comment that maybe darkness may not feel like darkness. We're going to look at 2 passages. First, we're going to look at John chapter 2, verse 9. He says, anyone who claims to be in the light, in that loving position, but hates a brother or sister is still in the darkness. So they think they're in the light when they really are still in the darkness. And then verse 11 says, but anyone who hates a brother or sister is in the darkness and walks around in the darkness. They do not know where they're going because the darkness has blinded them. What does John say the darkness does to the person who's in it? He says they walk around in darkness. They're blind. And he's saying it's those who claim to be in the light. And they claim to be in the light, but they're actually living in darkness because they hate a brother or a sister. We might have the spiritual confidence that, yes, I am walking in the light. But if we hate a brother or sister, we're still in the darkness. We don't have clarity in our spiritual walk. What does this tell us? Well, the darkness in this passage, it's not about depression or about doubt. It's a relational condition. It's what happens when we withdraw from people. Write them off, that they're not important enough anymore. And we go cold, or we stop loving those around us. Maybe there's individuals in our lives that we just think, I've gone as far as I can go. I don't care about them anymore. That's not love. Can there be a separation? Absolutely. There's people that we need to keep at arm's distance because of what it can do in our relationship, in our spiritual relationship. But even in that distance, we can love them. So it's not about depression or doubt. It's about the condition of those relationships. No, I don't have contact with that person anymore, but I love them. I want what is best for them. And when the opportunity arises, I'm going to share with them. But if we just completely write them off, maybe we're still in the darkness. We don't have to hate someone dramatically to be in the darkness. Just to say, man, I just can't stand that person. it's not like that. When he's talking about being in the darkness, it doesn't mean hatred. It doesn't, true hatred. Hate back in the scriptures just means love something less. It's having a quiet indifference towards a situation, or just making the decision that they're not worth the effort anymore. That can be considered hate. The scripture talks about, God makes the comment of, I think Jesus makes a comment, if you don't hate your mother and father, you cannot be with me. And that's the term that's used in scripture, but basically what he's saying, if you love your mother and father more than you love me, you can't have a place with me. And so that hatred, it's not a dramatic shift in just dislike and want nothing to do with that person. It is simply hatred that we just write them off. I don't know if this is making any sense, but just writing them off. Well, the practical danger in this is if the darkness blinds us, then we won't know when to ask for help. We claim to be in the light, but we hate our brother and sister, but we're really in the dark. So we don't know that we're in the dark because we claim we're living in the light. How do we know when to ask for help? And that's why community matters. That's why we need people around us. That's why it's important to be in groups for spiritual purposes, not just hanging out with your buddies, but gathering together with Christ at the center. You come together as church, not just to go to church, but to connect with one another. You go to a Bible study, not just for the Bible study, but to connect to one another. Those communities are important so that we can get to know each other better, and we can help each other whenever we start veering into the darkness to bring us back into the light. Before we move on, do we have someone in our life who would actually tell us if we were off track? If we are leaning into the darkness, do we have someone that would be there to help us, to point it out, that we would listen to? Not just agree with us, but actually tell us. Tell us that, hey, we are off track. You need to get on track. So John doesn't leave the readers in the darkness. He gives good news. Love doesn't just protect other people, it protects us. And we see that in number 3, love keeps us from stumbling. Have you ever had a friendship or a relationship that made you a better person? The person, someone that kept you grounded in a way you didn't fully appreciate until later. Excuse me. What did that look like? When we are living in love toward other people, something protective happens in us if we realize that. Verse 10. He says, anyone who loves their brother and sister lives in the light, and there is nothing in them to make them stumble. He's not saying that people who love are perfect, but he's saying love removes the things that often trip us up. Maybe a resentment that we have towards somebody, or ego issues, or the need to be right, or the bitterness that we might have toward others. If we are focused on love, then those things drift away. Stumbling blocks are those things that cause us to fall, to lose our way, to damage our faith, to hurt others by accident. And so we might have those tendencies. Our ego gets in the way, or the resenting of someone, or the frustration, or the miscommunications. And those are the stumbling blocks in faith. But he says love clears all those things out. When we are genuinely oriented toward other people, we're not spending our energy protecting ourselves or nursing grudges or keeping score. We have freedom in those relationships because Our focus is on others. Our focus is on loving others, and it's not about us. And practically speaking, people who are good at loving are often the most at peace. Not because their life is easier, but because they're not carrying the weight, the burden of those things that cause us to stumble. And so to focus on that relationship of love, walking in the light in such a way that we show up to be the presence of Christ to those that need it. Before we move on from here, where in our life is unresolved relational stuff costing us the most energy right now? What are those relationships that we have that we're stuck in that ego-driven, selfish pride instead of focusing on love, and we're rehashing things in those relationships and the weight of those things instead of loving the person through the power of the Spirit within us. Because if we love others, it's going to keep us from stumbling. It's not going to fix everything, but it will help us in growing in that relationship with others and with God. So we've talked about what love does for us and for others. Now we're going to take a step back, because John gives us a reason to be hopeful, not just challenged. He says something is already happening, and we get to be a part of it. What's already happening? Number 4, the light is already winning. You know, has there ever been a moment in your life that you were part of something that was bigger than yourself? Maybe it was a team or a movement or a cause that you got to be a part of. And because of that feeling of you're part of something bigger than yourself, it changed how you showed up. You were excited to be there. You were ready to be there, to be involved. Well, John is saying that we are part of a movement that has already started. And the darkness that is in this world is already on borrowed time. We're going to take a look at verse 8 again. Verse 8, yet I am writing you a new command. Its truth is seen in him and in you, because the darkness is passing away and the true light is already shining. No, John is inviting people to participate in something that's already in motion. Darkness is passing and the light is already shining. Jesus came. The light turned on. Darkness is losing. Every act of love is that confirmation of that fact, and the love is seen in him and in us. And so what does that mean for us? The darkness is passing is a process already underway. Not a goal that we're still working toward, that we're not trying to take out the dark. It's on its way out. We're not fighting to win. We're living out a victory that's already in progress. And that means even small acts of love matter. A simple, kind word. Staying in a hard conversation when most people would leave. Choosing to show up for someone when you'd rather not. Just those small things, they're the light of Christ showing up in the darkness of the world. And in reality, and I've said this many times, the community of believers is supposed to be the visible proof. We are the expression of Christ in this world. When we love each other well, especially when it's tough, we make the gospel of Christ visible. The light is already winning. We are just part of that process. We're part of something, a movement that is larger than ourselves, bigger than ourselves. And before we close, another question: where is there a small act of love toward a specific person that we have been putting off? What would it take to do it this week to show that love towards someone else? So the importance of showing up. This passage, John wrote this letter to people who were shaken. They were hurt. They were disoriented. People wondering if their faith was real after watching relationships fall apart. And he didn't answer them with a doctrine, with theology. He answered them with love. Because in John's mind, love is the doctrine. It's the evidence. It's the test. And remember what John said. Anyone who loves their brother and sister lives in the light. Not anyone who believes the right things, not anyone who has all the right experiences. It's anyone who loves their brother and sister lives in the light. And that's important because love is what the light looks like when it lands in a room full of people. When we bring love into our relationships, not that feeling love, just the love of God into those relationships, we are bringing the light of God into them as well. And so let's show up. Let's be the light of God by showing the love of God to those that we have contact with. Well, may the Lord bless you all. Hope you have a wonderful, wonderful week. And I hope to see you next time. God bless.